Welcome back to Giants Latest. It has been a very interesting offseason and it continues to heat up now that free agency is right around the corner. With that being said, there is a new free agent on the market. Let's talk about former Eagles cornerback Darius Slay. Is he a fit for the Giants? Now, Darius said that he would play one more year before he retired, and he thinks that he would like to go back to the Lions. So I also saw that it's possible that he could return back to the Eagles and that they are not officially cutting him just yet. But if he is a name that gets cut post June 1st, he's a guy to watch out for because we know that this Giants cornerback room desperately needs some help, especially from veterans. And I think that a guy like Darius Slay is going to bring a lot of leadership, and I think that he could be a good option for them. He's not the only choice that I would like for a veteran cornerback for the Giants to bring in. There are actually quite a few well above that I would like to. But I think when we talk about bringing in veterans who come from the winning mentality, and obviously he has dealt with a lot of really good coaches on the Eagles. Those are the types of players, in theory, that I want the Giants to bring in, who come from that type of mentality, who are willing to do whatever it takes to win, and also who came from a winning culture. And look, I think that culture gets tossed around a lot these days, and which is why that stupid Colts win really irritates me when people say it was a culture win. I don't believe in any of that. But ultimately, I do think that bringing the right guys into the locker room helps. And I think that if you bring in guys who are not team players, who only care about themselves, who, are there just for the money, I think it shows, and I think it can leak throughout the locker room, and it's not good. So, I think Darius Slay has had his own set of issues and has probably mouthed off a little bit to the media, but I do think that from a veteran perspective, he could bring a lot to this cornerback room, which again, we so desperately need. Again, not my first choice, but if he becomes a free agent, I think the Giants should consider it, depending on if it's post June 1st, what their cornerback room looks like at that point. Speaking of veterans, God, the Aaron Rodgers talk is really, it is something, let me tell you. And from what I can tell, most fans are anti it, and that's myself included. And the only thing that would make me feel okay about it is if they brought in Davante Adams too. And don't get me wrong, I am still not going to be thrilled, but I will feel a little bit better that they brought in the two of them because we do need a wide receiver. And Malik Neighbors has talked a lot about how he really wants to have veteran presence from a wide receiver standpoint and a quarterback standpoint. Now, do I think that Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers are the right choice for that? No, I don't. But again, they both have that winning mentality. And I think that if you bring in Rodgers, you have to bring in Adams. And it works out in the Giants' case because they do need a wide receiver. And, I think that Adams could teach Malik a few things. And, I think Malik has a really good head on his shoulders. And I do think that, I don't know, maybe he could also teach Adams a thing or two. It would be interesting nonetheless. I don't think that the Giants should be spending a ton of money on a veteran wide receiver. I think there are obviously other holes that they need to fill desperately that need to be a priority over a wide receiver. But I do think if you have a guy like Malik Neighbors who's out here saying that he would like a veteran presence in the locker room, and you have the option knowing that Adams wants to go where Rodgers does, then I think, like the Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp thing, you have to make it a package deal. I don't think it's a good idea to only bring in Rodgers. I don't necessarily think it's an amazing idea to bring in Rodgers and Adams, but like I said, I would just feel better about the two than the one. What do you guys think about that? I think at least you feel like you're getting a really good wide receiver too, which again is a position of need for the Giants. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. These next couple weeks until free agency are going to keep us on the edge of our toes. Let's just say that. So make sure you stay tuned to Giants Latest because we're going to have a lot to discuss. Speaking of, we have not talked about the salary cap yet, and it is the highest ever in the NFL at $279 million per team. Last year, it was $255. It went up over $40 million per team, which is insane. So if you're wondering where the Giants are at, let's talk about that, because as of right now, the Giants cap space, knowing that this is their number, is $48 million. Now their effective cap space is $38 million. So that means that technically they have $38 million in basically free available money to spend right now on players based on the contracts that they already have against the cap. So the contracts that they have against the cap right now are around $205 million. So again, that's how they get from the 205 to the 38 number. But ideally, knowing that the cap space is going to go up every year, it took this gigantic jump from 2024 to 2025. I think that it's going to help out the Giants in a way that maybe they'll get smart about the way that they structure some of these contracts so they can bring in more players this year and get them on longer term deals to help out for the future. Like I said, I'm not in win now mode. I'm in consistent winning mode for the future. So if they can figure it out from a salary cap perspective, which I like to think that they can, I hope, since Dave Gettleman is so far outside the building, that is something that they hopefully can use to their advantage. And they're in a good spot. Dead money wise, they have around $27 million in dead money, which is not a lot compared to some other teams. But then it's also not a small number compared to some other teams. Like the Steelers only have $45 million or $45,000 in dead money. That is insane. That's nothing. And then you've got other teams like the Browns who have $52 million in dead money. So, the Giants are where they are. Like I said, for the first time in a while, they're in a good space, salary cap wise, contract wise, everything. So next year is only going to be better. And, we'll see how this year goes as to whether or not Joe Schoen is retained and is able to enjoy the salary cap increase for next year. Let's finish off with this. The combine is behind us, and there were some winners and there were some losers. I think that we should just talk about the winners because I think ultimately, guys like wide receivers who said they were going to beat Xavier Worthy's 40 time and didn't, I think that's more of kind of like a social media jab joke type of thing than like these guys actually that it really affecting their draft stock that much. So let's talk about guys who really improved their draft stock. We talked a little bit about the quarterbacks in a different video, but Quinn Ewers looked quite good, and so did Riley Leonard. Now, Riley Leonard is a guy who also looked pretty well during the Senior Bowl, so I'm glad to see that guys like this who are going to be later round picks are improving their stock little by little, things like the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Now, ultimately, it doesn't mean that they're going to go from a third round pick to a second round pick, but it is enough to, I think, prove to coaches things like in the drills, if they're able to, throw with anticipation and throw to wide receivers that they've never worked with before. I think it shows that they, can deal with all of the changes that they're going to have to deal with as a rookie. Maybe not all of them, but you know what I mean. They're going to have to deal with some new stuff as a rookie, some changes that are going to have to be made. So that's where at with the quarterbacks. I also think that Jackson Dart did quite well for himself too, but Quinn Ewers, I think, really did the best out of the group. Running backs, Omarion Hampton and Quinshawn Judkins, both guys who did really well during the combine. And I know we've talked a lot about how the running back group in this year's draft is so deep and whether or not the Giants should draft a running back. Now, these guys who did really well at the combine are going to go earlier than I think the Giants should even consider drafting a running back. So they probably will be off the board, but I do think that it's always fun to see these guys and how fast they are. So speaking of that, we need to talk about Matthew Golden, who ran a 4.29 for his 40. Unbelievable. He beat out the guys who were talking crap about how they were going to beat Xavier Worthy. No one beat Xavier Worthy, but Matthew Golden did quite well running a 4.29. Jordan Watkins ran a 4.37 40 with a 36.5 vertical. He did really well with his workout. So another guy to keep your name on, Jordan Watkins from Mississippi. Had a nice combine. So a couple other names. Let's move along to offensive line because obviously this is where the Giants need some help. Guys like Jonah Savanea, I'm not 100% sure I pronounced that right, and Armand Membo. So when it comes to these guys, the focus is more on size and measurements, and both of these guys exceeded what people expected their measurements to be. So from an offensive line standpoint, again, a team that is so desperately in need of offensive linemen. I love to see things like that. Now, the last guy I want to talk about on defense, we have to talk about him because he is from my alma mater, University of South Carolina. And they're actually, I'm very impressed with my South Carolina boys because there were a few of them who did quite well at the combine, and they did well in the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. And I'm really excited because from when I graduated all the way back in 2012 up until the last 2 years or so, the football team has not been that great. And I love Shane Beamer. I love what he's done with the team. I got to meet him at the Senior Bowl, which was amazing. And, I got to talk to some of these players, and I'm really impressed with what they've done, especially being in the SEC. It's such a difficult conference, and just the fact that they were able to stand out this year. And I will never forgive. They were this close. They were this close to beating Alabama and LSU, and maybe they would have made it to the college playoffs, but I digress. We need to talk about Nick Amanwori, a safety from South Carolina who exceeded in every way, shape, and form that was possible at the combine. He was faster. He lifted more weights. Everything that he did was unbelievable across the board. The vertical jump, like every single thing he could have done was better than what was expected. Freakish performance of the weekend out of all positions. He was unbelievably the best. He measured in at oversized 220 pounds, but he's a safety, you guys. And he ran a 4.3840. His vertical was 43 inches, which was the best of the whole weekend. All positions, best of the whole weekend. 11.6 broad jump, which was also the best of the weekend. He's more than just an athlete. We saw this on the tape. I love it. I'm so excited for him. I don't think he's going to be a guy that the Giants are going to be able to get, because now the projections that I'm seeing are probably going to be like late first, maybe early second. You could say, well, the Giants have the 34th overall pick, but I don't expect them to pick a safety. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. And if he's the best player available, I hope that they do it and they don't let the Eagles or someone else jump in front of them and get him. But he's a guy to watch out for during the drafts, because I do think that aside from the fact that he's a freak athlete, I think that if he goes to the right team with the right system, he's absolutely going to thrive. And I like to see that for all of my former South Carolina players. So I'm excited for him, excited that the combine is over. We have a lot to discuss with that being done, and free agency just a couple days away. So make sure you stay tuned right here to Giants Latest.